Bienvenido a Oscuras Revelaciones. Este es el santuario oscuro donde la luna es testigo de secretos inconfesables y verdades perturbadoras. Aquí se desvelan historias tan sombrías y desgarradoras que desafían cualquier límite humano. Cada relato que escucharás te sumergirá más profundamente en un mundo donde el horror se manifiesta sin restricciones, donde las verdades más crueles son reveladas bajo el amparo siniestro de la oscuridad eterna. Prepárate, porque una vez que empieces a escuchar, ya no habrá vuelta atrás. Last Tuesday night's security playback held an impossibility, a glitch in the fabric of the expected. 20 times now, I've replayed the grainy monochrome sequence, the tremor in my hands refusing to subside. There's a shape, undeniably human in its drift, yet possessing no substance. It weaves through the tables of my establishment, the rusty mug, like coalesced smoke, the neon glow of beer signs shimmering straight through its form. Perhaps the genesis lies 3 weeks prior, when normalcy first began to fray at the edges. 6 years I've poured my life into this place, inheriting the keys from my uncle upon his Floridian retirement. The rusty mug isn't grand, just a quintessential neighborhood haunt south of the city. All dark timber, burnished brass fittings, and that enduring perfume of stale ale that no amount of scouring can fully banish. I'm intimate with every groan of its floorboards, every battle scar on the mahogany bar top, the face of every soul who seeks refuge within its walls. The stout faucet was the harbinger. It began on a languid Monday afternoon, amidst the quiet ritual of inventory. Unbidden, it unleashed a full dark stream directly into the drain tray. Not a hesitant drip, a deluge. My inspection of the mechanism revealed nothing amiss, no obvious fault. The moment my fingers brushed the handle, the flow ceased. Chalking it up to the eccentricities of aging equipment, I noted it for servicing. Yet, the phantom pour recurred 2 days later, and again the following week. Always that specific tap, always when the bar stood empty around it. The technician, when summoned, pronounced the draft system sound. Then, the networked music console developed its own spectral repertoire. Amidst the regular rotation of tunes, the audio would occasionally warp, not the familiar crackle of interference, but something more insidious, like clandestine whispers woven beneath the melody, syllables perpetually dissolving before comprehension. Once, deep in the quiet solitude of closing, it spontaneously conjured the parting glass, that mournful Irish farewell, though no selection had been made. The digital play history remained stubbornly blank regarding the song's phantom performance. Clara, my bartender of 3 steady years, tendered her resignation after a tumbler inexplicably launched itself from the gantry, shattering against the wall inches from her head. Not one prone to dramatics, she spoke of a fleeting sensation just before the incident. A brush against her arm, cold as glacial ice. I hired a replacement, Leo. His tenure lasted a mere 4 days. He couldn't shake the feeling of his name being called from the depths of the storage room whenever solitude claimed the bar. The final fissure in his resolve came when every bottle arrayed on the top shelf commenced a violent, simultaneous rattling, a localized tremor that shook only them, while the rest of the room remained placid. I began extending my vigils past closing, lingering in the amplified silence, watching, listening. The rusty mug transforms in the vacant hours. Each sound reverberates, acquiring weight. The ice machine's mechanical groans mimic labored breaths. Neon signs cast elongated, skittish shadows that seem to writhe just outside direct observation. Last Tuesday, I resolved to scrutinize the security recordings from the preceding weeks. 4 lenses keep watch, one surveying the bar's length, another the main seating sprawl, a third guarding the entrance, and the last fixed on the storage room. Methodically, I sifted through the footage, seeking anomalies. Initially, only the known phenomena surfaced: the self-actuating tap, the projectile glass, the trembling bottles. But then, a recurring subtlety emerged in the periphery of several clips, a distortion shimmering in the air, akin to heat haze rising from sun-baked asphalt. It moved with an unnerving purposefulness, drifting between tables, sometimes hovering near oblivious patrons. In one segment, it lingered beside a man nursing his drink for nearly 10 minutes. He kept rubbing his arms, a pantomime of chill despite the comfortable 75 degrees within the bar. The feed from 3 a.m. last Tuesday, however, burrowed deep into my psyche. The bar was shuttered, bathed only in the emergency glow of exit signs and the spectral hues of beer logos. The cameras, equipped with night vision, rendered the scene in stark gradations of gray. Just as my finger hovered over the fast-forward control, I saw it, a human silhouette, translucent yet distinct, traversing the main room. Its movement suggested levitation, a mere inch separating it from the floorboards. The figure's edges blurred, yet the fundamental form, head, shoulders, limbs, was undeniable. It paused at the bar, appearing to settle onto a stool. For 20 minutes, it remained static. Then, its head pivoted towards the camera. I could swear, even through the grainy feed, I perceived eyes. Endlessly, I rewatched that fragment. It defies rational explanation. No trick of light, no technological artifact. Corroborating footage from the other cameras, capturing different vantages, confirmed its presence. Whatever this entity is, it occupies space within these walls. The subsequent night, I augmented my surveillance, deploying additional cameras and scattering digital voice recorders throughout the establishment. This clandestine operation remained my secret. The label of madness is one I'd rather avoid, though perhaps insanity would offer a simpler, albeit less tangible, explanation. The new recordings captured intensified activity. The figure materialized once more, this time navigating the space behind the bar. It mimed the actions of pouring drafts, mixing concoctions, its incorporeal hands phasing through the very objects it sought to manipulate. One recorder captured a faint, ethereal sound, someone humming an old melody, the selfsame tune the jukebox had resurrected, the parting glass. My investigation turned to the building's lineage. Municipal archives revealed its continuous operation as a tavern since 1947, albeit under various banners over the decades. The records noted 3 deaths on the premises, 2 cardiac arrests, and 1 unfortunate patron who met his end via chicken wing in '82. Yet, the apparition, if such it is, bore no resemblance to descriptions of the deceased. Probing the memories of my elder regulars yielded mostly dismissive chuckles. But Silas Blackwood, a fixture at the bar since the '60s, grew somber at my tentative inquiries. He recounted his father's tales of an early barman, one Arthur Finch. Finch, the stories claimed, resided in the apartment overhead, his existence utterly entwined with the tavern below. A bachelor, rarely absent from his post. One morning in 1956, he was discovered lifeless behind the bar. Heart failure. He was only 42. A search through the City Chronicle archives unearthed a faded photograph of the bar circa 1955. There stood Finch behind the polished wood, tall, lean, dark-haired. The image suffered from the ravages of time, yet something in his posture, the way he held himself, it resonated disturbingly with the figure haunting my security feeds. The phenomena have escalated. Last night witnessed a spontaneous eruption from the well, every bottle simultaneously disgorging its contents, liquor spraying in chaotic arcs. For an hour, the jukebox became possessed by the spirit of Erin, playing naught but traditional Irish tunes, overriding all patron selections. The temperature behind the bar plummeted, my breath pluming visibly in the frigid air. I commit these words to paper, needing to chart a course. Selling the rusty mug, simply walking away, is an option. Yet, an intuition persists. Finch would disapprove. This establishment was his entire world, and seemingly remains so, even beyond the veil of death. Perhaps his intention isn't to terrorize, but merely to persist in the vocation he cherished. So tonight, a different approach. After the last patron departs, I intend to pour a measure of Jameson, reputed to have been his preferred tipple, and simply converse. Acknowledge his dedication, his desire to oversee the place, but explain the collateral damage, the frightened staff, the unnerved clientele. Propose a truce, an understanding. The cameras will roll, my phone will record. Should anything transpire, tangible proof might stave off the specter of my own perceived lunacy. Update, 3:47 a.m. The deed is done. I poured the shot, commenced my monologue to the empty air, initially feeling the sharp sting of absurdity. 20 minutes yielded nothing but silence. Then, the familiar chill descended. The shot glass glided, untouched, across the polished bar top before tipping over, drained. The jukebox flickered to life, the parting glass issuing forth once more, but this time the melody was clean, resonant, almost serene. The security footage, reviewed later, revealed the translucent form of Finch materializing beside me at the bar. It raised its own spectral glass in a silent toast. Though invisible to my naked eye at that moment, I felt it, an ephemeral, icy pressure upon my shoulder, a touch that sent shivers cascading down my spine. Since that nocturnal parley, a fragile peace has settled. The taps remain quiescent unless operated by living hands. The jukebox adheres to its program selections. Occasionally, in the liminal hours of early morning, a flicker in my peripheral vision hints at a tall, slender shape moving purposefully behind the bar. The presence feels less intrusive now, more watchful, almost proprietary. New staff have been inducted. I am upfront about our spectral co-manager. Reactions vary, disbelief, cautious curiosity, though a few late shifts tend to foster belief. Crucially, no one has fled. I suspect Finch has adapted, learned the rhythms of coexistence. He still performs his rounds after closing, a silent inspection of locks and taps. A glass might shift infinitesimally. An old Irish air might briefly grace the quiet room, but the overt manifestations have ceased. Last week, I had the 1955 photograph framed and mounted behind the bar. It's become a point of interest for the regulars, particularly when I share the anecdote of Finch's continued, albeit unseen, stewardship. Some have even taken to leaving a farewell shot for him upon departure. I've learned to attune myself to his subtle signals, the whisper-soft footfall on quiet nights, the faint humming of bygone tunes, the gentle clinking of glassware being nudged into alignment when no corporeal hand is near. His presence has woven itself into the very fabric of the place, as intrinsic as the floorboard's complaints and the neon's low thrum. This afternoon, engaged in the familiar task of inventory, just as I was that day the stout tap first rebelled, I felt the characteristic cold spot drift past. And then, unmistakably, a voice, thin as aged parchment, murmured close to my ear. "Looking low on the Jameson, Finn." A quick check confirmed his spectral assessment. We were indeed running low. I suppose every tavern requires diligent management. Some managers simply possess more permanence than others. The cameras continue their silent vigil. Sometimes I review the nightly footage, observing our ghostly barman on his rounds. He moves with quiet determination, inspecting tables, straightening unseen chairs, standing sentinel over the domain he loved so fiercely in life that even death could not compel him to leave. Explanations feel superfluous now. Some truths simply are. Sometimes, the only sensible course is to pour 2 measures at closing, one for yourself and one for the bartender who never truly clocked out. They say bars accrue personalities, absorbing decades of laughter and tears, triumphs and sorrows into their very timbers. The rusty mug, it seems, possesses more personality than most. And as long as Arthur Finch wishes to remain on staff, I'm content to share the duties. Just don't ask him to mix anything involving blue curacao. Even in the afterlife, a man has his standards. Tuesday afternoon yielded the first tremor, a vibration against my thigh, a message illuminating the screen. Those crimson trainers suit you. They echo the fire in your gaze. Mid-sip, my mug hovered, forgotten. A chill, sharp and sudden, snaked through me. Crimson trainers were indeed on my feet, and I stood entirely alone within the 4 walls of my apartment. Eyes unseen were fixed upon me. The howl remained an unnerving void. I'd cultivated privacy like a rare orchid. Navigating the digital labyrinth since youth, I understood the sanctity of robust passwords, the virtue of a minimal online footprint. Yet, preparedness offers no shield against the truly unforeseen. My name is Leo. What follows is the chronicle of my descent into a waking dread, orchestrated by text messages from a ghost in the machine. Initially, denial offered flimsy comfort. A friend's elaborate jest, a misdialed number paired with staggering coincidence. "Who is this?" I typed, my thumb hesitant. Silence answered. I attempted normalcy, consigning the digital intrusion to the cluttered attic of my mind. The following day shattered that fragile peace. The leftover carbonara does look tempting. Pity about that fuzz blooming in the fridge's dark corner. The warmth drained from me. Carbonara waited on my counter. A forgotten container festered precisely where described. This transcended chance. A frantic sweep of my sanctuary yielded nothing. No glint of a lens, no disturbed dust mote. Yet the violation seeped into the plaster, the air thick with unseen scrutiny. My refuge felt suddenly porous, myself utterly exposed. The messages persisted, each a scalpel dissecting my privacy. Your mother's called thrice. Perhaps return the courtesy. That thriller you're engrossed in. The meek assistant planted the bomb. Did you know you murmur in your sleep, Leo? Last night, a name surfaced. Clara. New tumblers clicked into my doorframe. Heavy curtains muted the windows. Nights were spent huddled on a friend's sofa. Futile gestures. The texts tracked my movements, anticipated my thoughts. It felt like wrestling smoke. The authorities offered sympathetic shrugs and boilerplate advice. Change the number, tighten digital security. Counsel already implemented, already failed. concrete threat absent, their hands were tied. Paranoia became my shadow. Every street corner held potential watchers. Every phone chime jolted my nerves like an electric current. I shrank from the world, venturing out only when necessity dictated, the imagined weight of countless eyes pressing down. Friends offered worried glances, but how to articulate this invisible siege without sounding unhinged? One evening, a message detailed the precise contents of a leather-bound journal secreted within my deepest desk drawer. Something inside me fractured. Raw impulse propelled me outdoors, into the cool night air, a hunter seeking his phantom tormentor. I scanned faces under sodium lamps, peered into parked vehicles, desperation clawing at my throat. Rounding a familiar corner, my phone pulsed. Trembling fingers unlocked the screen. "It's brisk tonight. Best head back before you catch a cold." I whirled, heart hammering against my ribs. The street stretched empty, silent, yet thick with the pressure of observation. Helplessness washed over me, cold and absolute. This unseen entity held the reins. They possessed my life, piece by piece, while remaining utterly unknown. Defeated, hollowed, I retreated. The click of my apartment door locking echoed the buzz in my pocket. "Welcome home, Leo." I crumpled against the door, a choked sob escaping. How had this become my reality? A captive in my own existence, perpetually monitored. Weeks dissolved into a gray fog of sleeplessness and gnawing anxiety. I grasped at straws, a burner phone, scrubbed email accounts, a relocation across town. The phantom followed. Decent new flat. The panorama from the bedroom is quite striking. The barber did well concealing that stubborn cowlick. Leaving your laptop unsecured during bathroom breaks. Risky. Each notification, a fresh puncture in my sanity. Was I fracturing? Had paranoia itself conjured this tormentor? Therapy felt like a last resort. Yet even within the hushed confidentiality of Dr. Anya Sharma's office, the phone vibrated. Dr. Sharma seems competent, unfortunate about her impending divorce. No sanctuary remained. My life, a labyrinth with no exit. A month into this relentless siege, the narrative shifted, darkening further. The day's message landed like a physical blow. "Perhaps it's time we met face to face, Leo." My hands shook, the words blurring and reforming. Abject terror warred with a sliver of desperate hope, the chance to finally see the architect of my ruin. "Where?" The reply felt alien, typed by fingers not entirely my own. Instantaneously, the Grindhouse Cafe, 5th and Main, 3 p.m. tomorrow, come alone. The intervening hours were a fever dream, oscillating between rehearsed confrontations and the urge to vanish completely. But escape felt illusory. They would find me, always. 15 minutes before the hour, I claimed a corner booth at the Grindhouse, back braced against the wall, surveying the entrance like a hawk. Each new arrival sent ripples of adrenaline through me. Was it him? Her? 3 o'clock struck. A buzz. I'm here. Red jacket, near the window. My gaze snapped upward. A woman sat alone, bathed in the afternoon light, clad in a simple red jacket. Mid-50s perhaps, silver threading her dark hair, eyes that held an unexpected kindness, crinkling slightly as she offered a tentative smile. Wholly unremarkable, not the monster my fear had sculpted. My legs felt like lead as I crossed the floor. Sliding into the opposite chair, her voice reached me, warm, almost maternal. "Hello, Leo. It's good to finally put a face to the name." A maelstrom of questions swirled within me. When my voice emerged, it was a ragged whisper. Why? Why are you doing this? A sigh escaped her, her expression clouding with something like sorrow. Oh, Leo, scaring you was never the intent. I was only trying to keep you safe. Safe? The word felt absurd, bitter on my tongue. By hounding me? By dismantling every shred of my privacy? Her hand started across the table, an instinctive gesture of comfort. I recoiled. She drew back, a flicker of hurt in her eyes. I understand how it must look, she murmured. But you need to know. After what happened to Clara, I couldn't lose you as well. Clara. The name struck like lightning, the cafe tilting around me. My sister, lost in a collision of steel and glass 5 years prior, long before this nightmare began. How could this stranger know her name? As if plucking the thought from my mind, she continued, her voice low. Clara was my daughter too, Leo. Your father, he never told you about me, did he? About his other life? The family he kept hidden across town. The floor seemed to vanish beneath my feet. This woman, she couldn't be. I'm your mother, Leo, your biological mother. When I lost Clara, I made a vow. I would shield you, my remaining child, with everything I had, even if it meant becoming a shadow in your life, learning every secret. The ambient noise of the cafe dissolved. The world contracted to this single, shattering truth. My entire existence, a carefully constructed fiction. The woman I'd called mother wasn't. This stranger, this tormentor, shared my blood. This is overwhelming, I know, she pleaded, her gaze searching mine. But try to see, it was all born from love. I surged upward, the chair screeching brutally against the tile. Heads turned. I saw none of them, only her face, etched with a desperate sincerity that felt like another violation. I need time, I stammered, the words thick in my throat before turning, stumbling towards the exit. Bursting onto the pavement, I dragged cool air into burning lungs. My phone pulsed a final time. Hands unsteady, I read, I'll be right here when you're ready. I love you, my son. I powered the device off, the screen going dark like a closing eye. I began to walk, aimlessly, adrift in the wreckage of my own history. My life, irrevocably fractured, and the chime of an incoming text message, forever tainted, a harbinger not of connection, but of devastating truth. The dissolution of my marriage propelled me towards solitude, towards a place insulated from intrusion. I secured the apartment on the promise of quietude. Mr. Finch, the building manager, offered few words beyond clean and affordable. He neglected to mention the vacant units flanking mine on the floor, or the corridors steeped in perpetual twilight, where the aged lighting sputtered erratically. None of it mattered. I craved only oblivion after the day's toil. Returning late that first night, the scent of bygone paint jobs and settled dust greeted me like stale breath. As I navigated the final turn towards my door, the hallway revealed an occupant. It lingered near the wall directly opposite my threshold, a presence not quite solid. Considerably taller than I, its silhouette seemed frayed at the edges, an indistinct figure woven from shadow. Where a face should have been, there was only a nebulous obscurity, a smudge upon the air's canvas. I froze, the ridges of my keys digging into my clenched fist. An arm lifted from the shape's torso, extending, pointing with undeniable intent at my apartment door. No sound accompanied the gesture. It remained utterly still. A dry swallow scraped my throat. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the profound silence. Tentatively, I advanced, eyes locked on the static form. It held its pose, arm outstretched, finger aimed unwavering at my door. "Hello?" The word died, absorbed by the heavy air. The figure offered no reaction. My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, wrestled the key into the lock. The tumblers yielded. I slipped inside, glancing back just before the door swung shut. It was still there. I slammed the heavy wood, threw the deadbolt, and leaned against it, lungs burning. The silence within the apartment was absolute, pressing. Peering through the fisheye lens of the peephole moments later, I found only the vacant, humming corridor. The following evening, ascending the stairs felt like wading through treacle. An unnerving quiet permeated the building. No muffled televisions, no murmur of voices from behind closed doors. Reaching my floor, I scanned the dim expanse. The corridor lights buzzed their low, monotonous song. As I neared my unit, it materialized again. Same location, same posture. A knot tightened in my gut. I tried to approach, but my limbs felt weighted, reluctant. The entity pointed relentlessly at my door. Though devoid of discernible eyes, the sensation of being scrutinized prickled my skin. I scrambled inside, secured the lock, and performed a cursory check. The small living area, the kitchenette, the bedroom, all was starkly ordinary, furnished with only my Spartan possessions and a small television set. Sleep offered little respite. The image of the pointing silhouette remained burned onto my inner eyelids. Night 3. Returning later still, I initially found the hallway empty. A sliver of relief eased through me as I walked towards my door. Then, abruptly, it flickered into existence mere feet away. A strangled cry escaped me as I stumbled backward, my bag nearly slipping from my grasp. It pointed. In that jarring moment, it seemed taller perhaps, or maybe the shock sharpened my perception. Its outline pulsed faintly, unstable, like heat haze or something imperfectly occupying space. I flung myself inside, the door crashing shut behind me. Henceforth, I left lamps burning through the night, a futile ward against the encroaching strangeness. Around midnight, the television in the living room would click on, unbidden, its screen alive with roiling static. I switched it off. Minutes later, it flared to life again. I yanked the plug from the wall. Later, the insistent buzz of static roused me from a shallow sleep. The television was on, its cord still lying inert on the floorboards. The subsequent week saw the anomaly intensify. A rank odor began to emanate from the refrigerator each morning, regardless of the freshness of the groceries purchased the previous evening. Produce blackened and liquefied overnight. Bread sprouted mold within hours. Milk curdled inside sealed cartons. My diet shifted entirely to takeout, the kitchen rendered unusable. I tried to dismiss the susurrus I began to perceive within the walls, faint whispers that coiled just beneath the threshold of hearing. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would press my ear against the cool plaster of the bedroom wall and detect soft, unintelligible murmurs, a low thrumming that chilled my flesh. And every night, the shape manifested, always in the corridor, always near my door, always pointing its silent accusation. Its presence saturated the air with a palpable weight whenever I approached. It remained impervious to my attempts at communication, utterly silent, utterly still. No draft emanated from it, yet the air surrounding it held a distinct, unnatural cold. The thought of rushing past it occurred, but any attempt to close the distance resulted in a suffocating tightness in my chest, forcing retreat. My inquiries with Mr. Finch proved fruitless. His lobby office remained locked, the bell unanswered. Knocks on neighboring doors during daylight hours yielded only silence. The building felt deserted, devoid of footsteps or the faintest echo of other lives. Only me and the nocturnal sentinel. One evening, I deliberately delayed my return, hoping darkness itself might deter its appearance. The hope withered as I climbed the final flight of stairs. It was there, waiting. In a surge of desperate frustration, I charged towards it, determined to confront its substance. My outstretched hand passed through the shape as if through smoke. A biting cold seized my arm, leaving it momentarily numb. The figure remained undisturbed, still pointing. I staggered, unbalanced, effectively passing through it, fumbling frantically with my lock. Turning after securing the door, I found it somehow repositioned on the interior side of the threshold, still pointing towards the apartment's depths. Panic seized me. I retreated further inside, locking myself away from what? A persistent malaise settled over me. Headaches became frequent companions, and a profound weariness clung to me constantly. Sleep offered no restoration. The whispers within the walls grew bolder, less deniable. The television continued its spectral performances at unpredictable hours. The pervasive stench of decay from the kitchen became insurmountable, defying cleaning products and air fresheners. I abandoned cooking entirely, taking every meal out, lingering in bars or late-night cafes, postponing the inevitable return. But eventually, exhaustion demanded surrender. One night, I attempted to sleep in the living room, every light blazing, the television physically removed from its outlet. Around 2 a.m, the familiar hiss of static shattered the quiet. The television screen glowed, alive, despite being unplugged and disconnected. A vice gripped my chest. I rose, pulled the plug again, uselessly, and the screen died. Heart hammering, I sat rigid on the sofa. A distinct creak echoed from the hallway. Slowly, inexorably, my apartment door swung inward on its hinges. I was paralyzed. The shape stood framed in the doorway. It didn't enter but remained on the threshold, its unwavering finger now directed towards my bedroom door. "What do you want?" The shout tore from my throat, raw and desperate. Silence answered. I scrambled towards the door, slamming it shut. As the wood met the frame, the shape vanished. The next day, I contacted the landlord. Release from the lease was possible, he conceded, but only upon payment of a crippling penalty. Funds I didn't possess. Loan applications were denied. The search for alternative accommodation proved daunting. Everything decent felt impossibly expensive. My routine shifted. Leave before sunrise, return long after dark, minimizing my time within those 4 walls to the barest minimum required for sleep. One evening, I tried a different approach. Standing in the corridor, facing the silent figure, I spoke calmly. "I understand you want me to go inside. Why? What's in there?" It merely pointed. Resigned, I entered the apartment, leaving the door ajar. The shape remained outside, sentinel-like, its gesture unchanged. Nothing stirred within. The bedroom appeared mundane. The bed, the dresser, the closet containing only my clothes. I closed and locked the door. The whispers seemed to emanate directly from the plaster. Tapping the walls sometimes produced a hollow resonance. On one occasion, I peeled back a loose flap of ancient wallpaper near the bedroom, revealing cracked plaster beneath. Tapping this spot yielded a faint vibration, a subtle thrum, as if something stirred within the partition itself. I called the police. 2 uniformed officers arrived the following evening. As I opened the door to greet them, the corridor was empty. Their inspection revealed nothing overtly sinister. Old wiring, yes, but functional. No anomalies noted. They departed, sympathetic but unhelpful. Scarcely had their footsteps faded down the stairwell when the shape reappeared, resuming its silent vigil. Attempts to capture evidence proved futile. Video recordings on my phone showed only an empty hallway. Flowers sprinkled on the floor near the door was disturbed by mourning, but yielded no distinct prints, only bizarre, unsettling smears. Food left out as an offering either vanished or was found grotesquely spoiled by dawn. And night spent on a friend's sofa offered temporary reprieve. Upon returning the next morning, the apartment was as I'd left it, save for a markedly intensified odor of decay and new dark stains blooming inside the refrigerator. Occasional flares of aggression led nowhere. Swinging a broom handle through the shape met no resistance. A powerful flashlight beam passed directly through it, illuminating the wall beyond, utterly unaffected. Shouted curses and demands were met with the same impassive silence. Other minor disturbances became commonplace. Interior doors refused to remain shut. The bathroom door, carefully closed, would later be found ajar. Chairs stacked defensively against the front door overnight would be neatly returned to the table by morning. The television, even after its spectral resurrection, once migrated from the living room to the kitchen while I slept. My phone, left charging on the coffee table, reappeared on the kitchen counter, inexplicably still plugged into a different outlet. Windows, meticulously locked before leaving, would be found open upon my return. Light fixtures sometimes emitted a faint spectral glow even after their bulbs had been removed. Eating or drinking anything sourced from the apartment became impossible. Tap water acquired a stale metallic taste, no matter how long the faucet ran. The bathroom tap developed a persistent, maddening drip that no amount of tightening could quell. An ever-present scent of damp earth and old decay, like a long, undisturbed cellar, clung to everything. The building's profound silence amplified my own sounds into startling echoes, yet my occasional shouts into the void elicited no response. Once, I deliberately left my apartment door open and ventured down the corridor, seeking any sign of another tenant. The shape manifested further down the hall, always positioning itself between me and the stairwell, its finger now directing me back towards my own unit. Attempting to reach the stairs after dark became a disorienting ordeal. The lights would flicker violently, and I would inexplicably find myself deposited back on my own floor, near my apartment, the building itself seemingly conspiring to keep me contained. Daylight permitted normal egress, but the necessity of retrieving clothes, belongings, my life's meager remnants, always forced my return. There was simply nowhere else to go. My ex-wife's number went straight to voicemail. Friends offered strained sympathy but palpable disbelief. One visited during the afternoon, saw nothing amiss, and left before dusk. That night, the shape was there, pointing. Eventually, a weary resignation set in. I stopped acknowledging the shape, averted my gaze as I passed it, heading straight inside. I learned to ignore the putrid smell from the kitchen, the phantom static. I hauled the television down to the dumpster. The next evening, it sat in my living room again, How? I couldn't fathom. Stripping the bedroom bare, leaving only the mattress, changed nothing. The presence remained fixed on that portal, night after relentless night. One desperate night, I tried sleeping in the hallway itself, my back pressed against my apartment door, staring defiantly at the shape across the corridor. Hours crawled by. My eyelids grew heavy. A distant whisper brushed my ear. A chill traced my spine. Jerking fully awake, I saw the shape had drifted closer. Panic surged. I scrambled upright and bolted back inside my apartment. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet certainty. I would leave it all. The lease, the penalty, the deposit, my possessions. None of it mattered anymore. Packing a single bag with essentials, I waited for the gray light of dawn, the time when the building seemed most normal, the shape absent. I walked down the stairs, through the lobby, and out onto the street without a backward glance. I never returned. Let the apartment keep its secrets, its smells, its whispers. Let the silent, pointing shape have the space. I didn't care what it wanted. I was simply gone. Dereliction sang a siren song few seemed to hear, but its call resonated deep within me. So, when the skeletal frame of St. Dymphna's asylum, perched precariously on the town's forgotten fringe, entered local lore, I felt an undeniable pull. It existed in hushed tones, a place ringed by fearful conjecture, phantom sounds, fleeting apparitions, narratives I dismissed as flimsy folklore. Proof, visceral and self-witnessed, was what I sought. Ghosts held no currency in my world. The night I chose for my pilgrimage was brittle with cold. Still air, thick as velvet, swallowed sound whole beneath a sky choked with cloud, amplifying the gloom. I left my car swallowed by shadows some distance away, approaching the asylum on foot, flashlight clutched like a talisman. St. Dymphna's loomed, a jagged silhouette against the bruised twilight, immense and forbidding. Windows gaped like empty sockets, doors lolled drunkenly from hinges, and tenacious vines clawed at crumbling brickwork, a labyrinthine sprawl surrendered to decay. A fractured pane offered ingress. I slipped through, shards crunching underfoot, into an atmosphere instantly tangible, stagnant, weighted with dust, and permeated by a chill that felt ancient, profound, utterly out of sync with the season. The silence within was absolute, a pressure against the eardrums, as if the very structure were poised, expectant. My flashlight beam sliced through the inertia, illuminating a swirling galaxy of dust motes. Detritus littered the floor, shattered tiles, splintered furniture, forgotten documents adrift in a sea of neglect. My advance was cautious, deliberate, each footfall a stark percussion in the stillness. I navigated spectral examination rooms, skeletal offices, a waiting area frozen in mid-flight. Possessions lay abandoned, suggesting a sudden, panicked exodus. Chairs remained in patient rows. Archaic medical apparatus rusted silently in corners, and faded placards on the walls whispered warnings of long-conquered contagions. Deeper I ventured into the asylum's decaying heart, and the air grew colder still, heavy with an unnerving quality that settled beneath my skin. Nerves, I reasoned, simple apprehension. Yet the silence felt curated, too perfect, as though the building itself were sentient, observing, anticipating a misstep. Down a long, echoing corridor I moved, the flashlight's beam a nervous probe in the oppressive dark. Paint peeled from the walls like sunburnt skin, revealing faded signage indicating forgotten wards. The surgical wing beckoned, the epicenter, rumor insisted, of the asylum's disquiet. Curiosity warred with a rising instinct for retreat. Then, a sound. Indistinct, a mere rustle, the ghost of a footstep somewhere in the blackness ahead. I froze, held my breath, listened intently. Nothing returned but the frantic thrum of my own pulse against my ribs. The building settling, perhaps. A draft whistling through broken glass. Anything but the chilling possibility. Company. I pressed onward, dismissing the tremor of unease. The surgical wing was a pocket of intensified darkness, its grimy windows offering little respite from the night. Another corridor stretched before me, my steps loud in the confined space. Rooms flanking it were different here, smaller, clinical, each dominated by a stark metal table flanked by rows of cabinets. On some tables lay stained, time-rotted sheets, faint outlines of discarded instruments, rusted and blunted, were visible beneath layers of grime. I entered one such room, sweeping the light across its barren surfaces. Empty shelves lined the walls. Dust lay thick as fallen snow. My beam drifted towards the central table, the metal slab gleaming dully. And there it was, stark against the gray film. A handprint, small, child-sized, and undeniably fresh, the dust disturbed, smeared as if fingers had dragged across the cold surface. A sudden, icy paralysis seized me. My thoughts scattered. An animal? A raccoon, perhaps, finding shelter? The explanation felt thin, inadequate. The print was too clear, too deliberate, too human. Retreating from the room, my flashlight beam now frantic, I scanned the hallway's emptiness. Vacant doorways yawned like mouths. Silence pressed in again, but now it felt charged, watchful. I turned, resolve hardening, time to leave. But a single step forward was arrested by a new sound. Whispering. Faint, sibilant, emanating from further down the corridor. Barely audible, a low murmur, urgent yet unintelligible. Frozen again, I strained to pinpoint its source. It seemed close, just around the next bend. Against every screaming instinct, I crept forward, the flashlight trembling violently in my grip. As I eased around the corner, the whispering ceased abruptly. Utter silence crashed back in. My light swept the empty space, more derelict rooms, gaping doorways, impenetrable darkness. A visceral chill traced its path down my spine. I began to back away, survival instinct finally overriding curiosity. And then, the shuffle. Closer this time, directly behind me. I spun, stabbing the darkness with light. The corridor stretched back, empty, cold, utterly still. My walk became a stumbling trot, quick, unsteady steps echoing maniacally through the vast structure. The sensation of being pursued was overwhelming now, a palpable pressure at my back, something unseen keeping pace just beyond the light's reach. My heart hammered against my ribs, breath catching raggedly in my throat. Fear, raw and primal, threatened to consume me. I reached the main vestibule, the exit almost within grasp, when a sound drifted through the dead air that turned my blood to ice. A child's laughter. Soft, distant, yet resonating with impossible clarity through the vacant asylum. I stopped dead, mind reeling. No child could be here. Impossible. The laughter echoed again, nearer this time, seeming to drift towards me down the hallway. I stumbled backward, flashlight beam dancing erratically. Panic surged, a suffocating wave. Run! My mind screamed, "Get out!" But my legs felt leaden, anchored to the decaying floor. Then, a flicker of movement at the periphery of my vision. At the far end of the hall, cloaked in shadow, stood a small figure, barely discernible, a silhouette against the deeper black, yet unmistakably childlike. It stood perfectly still, watching. I saw no features, only the shape, the unnerving stillness, the slight inquisitive tilt of its head, as if it were waiting. I broke, turned and fled, boots pounding a frantic rhythm on the debris-strewn floor, the echoes chasing me through the labyrinthine corridors. No looking back, no hesitation, only the desperate, lung-searing sprint towards freedom. I burst through the shattered entrance doors into the biting night air, gulping it down like a drowning man. I didn't cease running until I reached the sanctuary of my car, fumbling with the keys, hands shaking so violently the lock seemed an impossible puzzle. Engine roaring to life, I sped away, refusing the urge to glance in the rearview mirror. Days have bled into night since my escape from St. Dymphna's, yet the asylum hasn't entirely released its grip. The feeling lingers, an unwelcome residue that I didn't leave entirely alone. Behind closed eyelids, the shadowy figure reforms at the end of that final corridor, perpetually watching. And sometimes, in the deepest quiet of the night, when the world outside is hushed, I fancy I hear it, the faintest whisper, threading through the silence like an inescapable memory. A slick chill woke me, the sheets clinging damply to my skin. It was the first night since the arrival, the first night with it in the house. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my bones. A dull pressure throbbed behind my eyes. Fumbling, I ignited the bedside lamp, its sudden glare making me squint. I rubbed the sleep grit from my eyes, trying to anchor myself in the familiar room, yet a formless anxiety coiled in my gut. Why? The question hung unanswered in the quiet air. I sat, breathing raggedly through my mouth, listening to the frantic pulse in my ears. After a moment, propelled by that nameless unease, I rose and padded into the living room. Darkness reigned, softened only by the sodium orange glow filtering in from the street, painting the furniture in eerie, elongated shapes. No overt movement disturbed the shadows, but an undeniable wrongness emanated from the corner where the inherited canvases leaned. Just days prior, a solicitor's letter had informed me of an inheritance, a clutch of old paintings from a relation so distant I hadn't known his name, let alone his existence. Apparently, I was the last twig on that particular family branch. It felt peculiar, spectral even, but I accepted. They arrived entombed in a vast wooden crate, swaddled in musty straw and thick, brittle paper. Most were landscapes, brooding forests, faded fields under sullen skies, competent but unremarkable. One, however, arrested my gaze, a portrait, a man draped in the stiff formality of perhaps the 17th or 18th century, stared out, or would have, had his face not been a disturbing lacuna. Where features should have been, the paint was smeared, abraded, leaving only a ghostly, indistinct haze over eyes and mouth, as if some past owner had tried to violently unsee him. The rest endured in meticulous detail, the glint of buttons on his dark coat, the stiff lace of his collar, the chiaroscuro suggestion of a room behind him. But the face, a scoured void. It unnerved me from the moment I unwrapped it. I propped the portrait against the living room wall, intending a closer study later to discern if time or malice had caused the damage. Perhaps it held some hidden value. Perhaps it belonged only in the deepest storage. Hanging it felt wrong, intrusive, so it remained grounded, angled against the low cabinet. No eyes, a mere suggestion of a nasal ridge, a pale, unsettling smudge where lips should be. Each glance sent a ripple of discomfort through me. Sleep that first night was a skittish creature. No footsteps echoed, no whispers disturbed the silence, yet my mind conjured the blank oval of the portrait, imagining features resolving themselves in the dark. I tracked patterns on the ceiling, forced my breathing slow, courted oblivion. Around 3, I finally submerged, only to surface moments later, it seemed, coiled tight with tension. Barefoot, clad only in pajama bottoms, I returned to the living room. I stood before the canvas, bathing it in the stark glare of the overhead light. Initially, nothing seemed altered. Then, leaning closer, my breath catching, I perceived, or hallucinated, faint etches where none had been before, sketching the barest suggestion of a brow ridge, a phantom contour. I drew back, scrubbing a hand across my mouth, and plunged the room back into shadow. Imagination, I chided myself. Fatigue. Back to bed. Morning light offered little reassurance. The face remained fundamentally incomplete, yet I found myself scrutinizing its texture. A minuscule elevation marred the canvas on the left side of the putative forehead. Dry to the touch, yes, but possessed of a faint sheen under direct light. My fingertips traced it, a definite bump. Lacking any rational explanation, I shrugged it off, immersing myself in mundane tasks. Errands, cleaning, sorting the other, less troubling canvases, somber castles, dense woods, agrarian scenes beneath bruised clouds, dreary, perhaps, but potentially valuable antiques, demanding care. By late afternoon, weariness had settled deep in my bones. Coffee brewed, I stood in the kitchen doorway, gaze inevitably drawn to the living room, to the portrait. Silence hummed, broken only by the refrigerator's low thrum. The setting sun cast long amber shafts across the floor, igniting the canvas. I narrowed my eyes, stepped nearer. Something had shifted around the mouth area, a subtle darkening, a deepening of pigment, as if the void were grudgingly yielding form. I hefted the painting, carried it to the window, tilted it this way and that in the fading light. Yes, the idea of lips, a faint, nascent outline. My pulse quickened. Dismiss it, I told myself, setting the canvas back down with deliberate force. Forget it. That evening, the television murmured low, a flickering distraction. But my eyes kept straying to the portrait, lurking in my peripheral vision. Propped against the wall again, it seemed fractionally more upright, canted slightly forward. Around 11, unable to bear its silent regard any longer, I snatched a heavy gray throw blanket from the sofa and decisively draped it over the canvas, obscuring it completely. A wave of relief washed over me. The blanket sagged, covering frame and all. Tomorrow, I decided. I'd deal with it tomorrow. An antique dealer, perhaps, assess its worth, its potential for repair or disposal. Killing the living room lights, I retreated to bed. Sleep came easier, though troubled by fragmented dreams of swirling paint and indistinct faces, none jarring enough to wake me fully. The next morning, coffee cup in hand, I entered the living room. The blanket lay crumpled beside the coffee table. The painting stood exposed, facing me, and the face. It was no longer blank. An outline of eyes, nose, and lips had emerged, faint and uncertain, yet undeniably present. but this nascent visage held no human warmth. A wrongness twisted the nascent curve of the mouth. The corners tilted upward, yet the eyes remained incomplete, shadowy depressions. My breath hitched. Setting the mug down with a clatter, I rubbed my temples, a sudden chill raising gooseflesh despite the closed windows. No draft. Nothing else disturbed. Only the painting, altered. My palms were slick. I wiped them on my trousers, forcing slow breaths. I picked up the discarded blanket. Normal. No tears, no marks. I tossed it onto the sofa. Examining the canvas surface, the paint felt utterly dry, yet my vision insisted on the change. I recalled the mouth from yesterday, a mere hint. Now, it was a definite curling shape, suggesting not a smile, but a sneer. Nausea churned. Enough. I resolved to move it, sequester it in the spare room, behind a closed door. I carried it carefully, studiously avoiding the emergent face, though the eyes were still pits of shadow. Inside the spare room, I leaned it against a small chest of drawers, then shut the door firmly behind me, breathing too fast. My heart thumped erratically. I forced down some breakfast, tasteless eggs sticking in my throat, my gaze flicking constantly towards the hallway. Throughout the day, I battled the urge to check, telling myself I was succumbing to shadows, to frayed nerves. I vacuumed, dusted, filled the house with busy noise, trying to drown out the insidious presence. But every so often, a faint creak, seemingly from the direction of the spare room, would snag my attention. The house settling, I insisted. The vacuum whined. The smell of dust filled the air. By mid-afternoon, the tension became unbearable. I walked down the hall. The air near the spare room door felt distinctly cooler. I grasped the knob, cold metal under my palm, turned it and stepped inside. The painting stood upright against the wall. I hadn't left it that way. I distinctly remembered leaning it against the chest. Now it stood several inches clear, poised, as if deliberately positioned. A knot formed in my stomach as I approached. The face, more detailed. The eyes now possessed discernible shapes, narrow slits suggesting pupils. The nose seemed sharper, more defined. And the mouth, its corners stretched higher, the sneer evolving into an expression bordering on malevolent glee. It held a grotesque familiarity, like my own reflection caught forcing a smile, but horribly distorted. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. My pulse roared in my ears. Reaching out with a trembling hand, I pushed the painting flat against the chest again, ensuring it couldn't tilt forward. Then I fled the room, locking the door behind me. An instinctive, irrational act, yet it offered a sliver of security. In the kitchen, I drank water, watching the clock, my hands shaking. What was I supposed to do? Destroy it? Burn it? On what grounds? It was just paint on canvas, wasn't it? Night fell again. I blazed every light in the house, banishing shadows, illuminating hallways. I sought refuge in a loud television comedy, forcing laughter that felt hollow. Around midnight, a distinct thud echoed from the spare room. I flinched violently, muting the TV instantly. Silence rushed in, amplifying the frantic drumming in my chest. Slowly, deliberately, I crept down the hall, floorboards groaning under my weight. I pressed my ear to the locked door. Nothing but the frantic whistle of my own breath. Steeling myself, I unlocked it. The painting lay face down on the carpet. No sign of disturbance to the chest or anything else. Crouching, I lifted it gingerly by its edges. The face, revealed again, struck me with a fresh horror. It now bore a distinct, albeit distorted resemblance to my features. The cheekbones higher, the jawline echoing my own, the eye shapes unnervingly familiar, like gazing into a warped mirror. But the mouth, stretched into a wide, predatory grin, hinting at unnaturally pointed teeth. I blinked, trying to process the impossible. Panic surged, cold and sharp. Covering it felt futile now. With a chilling sense of inevitability, I decided to bring it back to the living room. Carrying it felt like handling something diseased, my skin crawling where my fingers brushed the frame. I set it against the wall, stepped back. My own reflection in the dark TV screen showed a hunched figure, sweat beading on my brow. As I stared, the painted eyes, my eyes, yet not, seemed to fix on mine, holding my gaze. I swallowed, throat dry. Leaving it alone felt unbearable. Staying with it, equally so. I thought of calling someone. Leo, maybe Sarah. But the words caught in my throat. What could I possibly say? My phone felt like lead in my pocket. I pulled it out, scrolled through contacts, then locked it again, defeated by the fear of sounding unhinged. I paced the room, fists clenched, the refrigerator's hum a monotonous counterpoint to my racing thoughts. Turning off the television, I surrendered. The blanket again. My hands trembled as I draped it over the frame, ensuring complete coverage. Then, desperate, I fetched masking tape from a kitchen drawer, securing the blanket's edges to the wall and floor with multiple strips. A flimsy defense, but perhaps enough to last the night. A shaky exhale escaped me. Switching off the living room light felt like plunging into deeper peril, but I forced myself towards the bedroom, locking the door firmly behind me. In bed, I lay rigid, listening to the frantic symphony within my own chest, staring sightlessly at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged me under. Waking the next day was like surfacing into dread. The walk to the living room felt leaden, each footstep echoing the heavy thud in my chest. The air was cold. The blanket lay discarded on the sofa. The tape lay on the floor nearby, strips curled and torn, violently peeled away. And the painting, it stood uncovered, watching. The eyes were fully realized now, uncannily mirroring my own. The precise shade of hazel, the shape, the slight downward tilt at the outer corners. My eyes, but utterly devoid of warmth, of life. The mouth was slightly parted, revealing smudges of off-white where teeth should be, the grin fixed and terrifying. My heart plummeted. A strange numbness spread through my hands. I staggered back, shaking my head in mute denial. I seized the painting, impulse screaming to hurl it out the nearest window into the street, but I hesitated, trapped by its gaze. In those painted eyes, I saw a chilling reflection of my own terror. My mouth was parchment dry. Breathe, Elias, breathe. I set the canvas down carefully, pacing again, trapped in a vortex of indecision. Pressure built in my chest, thoughts fragmenting. The garage? Too far, too much effort. While this paralysis held me, I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, staring at my own distorted features leering back from the ancient canvas. The house felt vast, empty, silent save for my ragged breathing. Living with this thing was impossible. I took another step back, stomach churning, sweat trickling down my temples. The painted grin seemed to deepen, to widen. Looking away felt like a physical wrench, but I forced my gaze towards the window, towards the indifferent morning light. Then, helplessly, back to the painting, its silent, watchful presence, an almost physical weight. I retreated to the kitchen, poured water I couldn't drink, my hand shaking too violently. Setting the glass down, I leaned against the counter, taking deep, shuddering breaths. It didn't help. My heart refused to slow. The sensation of being watched was suffocating, prickling the back of my neck even though the painting remained in the other room. I drifted back towards the living room doorway. It hadn't moved, yet those eyes tracked me, the awful smile seeming to stretch fractionally wider. My jaw ached from clenching. Compelled, I approached it again, reached out a hesitant finger, brushed the painted surface. Dry, utterly dry, yet the lines felt raised, solid beneath my touch. I snatched my hand back as if burned. The pounding in my chest intensified. I couldn't stay near it. A plan began to form. Call someone, anyone, an antique dealer, a junk removal service, drive it somewhere, anywhere. My phone. The battery icon glowed angry red. Charger. In the bedroom. That's where I am now, penning this frantic account, a crushing weight settling on my chest. Small noises drift from the living room. Faint scuffles. The sound of a wooden frame perhaps shifting against plaster. I don't want to go back out there. The bedroom door is closed, but the chill seeps under it. My heart races. My breath comes in shallow gasps. Every creak, every sigh of the old house makes me jump, expecting another thud, another scrape. I can't shake the insidious certainty that the painting is waiting, that it's drawing me back, wanting me to look again. My thoughts scatter like startled birds, coalescing around one sharp point of clarity. I have to get rid of it. Now. I will not spend another night under the same roof as that thing. The stuttering cone of my headlamp painted fractured specters across the lithic tapestry of the cavern walls. I wrapped the casing against my thigh, a silent plea for stability, but the illumination merely waned, surrendering ground to the subterranean gloom. That faltering radiance, our fragile tether to the known, was fraying. "Friends," I ventured, my voice a thin thread swallowed by the damp, echoing stone. "I suspect our situation has devolved." It was conceived as a straightforward delve. Lena, Reese, and I, seasoned trekkers all, had dreamt of this spelunking venture for months. Yet, this was our inaugural descent into a labyrinth of such sprawling complexity. The siren song of discovery had deafened us to prudence. Now, enveloped by a darkness that felt ancient and absolute, the weight of our hubris settled. We'd breached the cave's maw near dawn, equipped with cartography, coils of rope, and provisions deemed ample. The initial hours surged with exhilaration. We gaped at calcite draperies frozen mid-flow, captured images of sunless rivulets whispering through sculpted channels, intoxicated by the notion of treading where perhaps no human foot had fallen for millennia. But the deeper we burrowed into the planet's viscera, the more the expedition soured. An errant passage led us off our charts into an unfamiliar warren. We attempted to retrace, but the serpentine corridors bled into one another, mocking our memory. Then Reese, planting his boot on slick stone, went down, his ankle twisting with a sickening pop. Not catastrophic, but it hobbled our progress. And now, this, our primary beacon faltering. Devolved how? Lena's query sliced through the quiet from my left, taut with a tremor she fought to conceal. I swept the flickering beam her way, catching the stark white of her knuckles, the wide, reflective fear in her eyes. "The lamp," I stated flatly. "Its heart is failing. The power cells are spent." Reese dragged himself closer, his face a pale mask in the expiring light. "Impossible. These were fresh this morning, sealed. Apparently, not fresh enough, I retorted, the sharp edge of my fear finding voice. Instantly, regret washed over me. This wasn't Blame's hour. We were adrift on the same subterranean sea. Lena retrieved her mobile device, its screen bathing her features in an ethereal luminescence. No reception, naturally, but the torch function, it offers some respite. I nodded, a surge of gratitude for her presence of mind. Yes, excellent. But let's hoard that glow. We're blind to how long this night beneath the earth might last. The chill finality of our predicament began to crystallize. Lost. A maze of stone arteries. Light dwindling. No lifeline to the surface. The cool, moist air, once invigorating, now felt like a shroud, leaching warmth from my very marrow. Right, I declared, striving for a resonance of command I didn't feel. Wandering blind invites only deeper entanglement. We need a strategy. Reese nodded, a grimace tightening his lips as he shifted his injured leg. We should attempt to backtrack, regain the main conduit we followed initially. A sound plan on paper. In practice, under the meager spectral wash of Lena's phone, it proved maddeningly elusive. Every bifurcation mirrored the last. We'd commit to a tunnel, a flicker of recognition urging us on, only to confront a cold stone terminus or emerge into a chamber utterly alien. Hours bled into an amorphous passage of time, unmeasurable in the cave's eternal twilight. We parceled out sustenance, sipped water with deliberate care, acutely aware of their finite nature. The silence grew monolithic, punctuated only by the scuff of our boots and the rhythmic plink of water weeping from unseen heights. Pressure mounted. Reese's limp became a pronounced drag. Lena's hand, holding the phone aloft, betrayed a constant, minute tremble as its power icon bled steadily away. A suffocating claustrophobia crept into my lungs, the immense tonnage of rock and soil above feeling ever more personal, ever more intent on crushing us. Then, a vibration. So subtle at first, I dismissed it as a tremor within my own strained body. A low, resonant hum, less heard than felt, thrumming through the very bones of the earth around us. Did you feel that? I whispered, the instinct for silence illogical yet overwhelming. Lena nodded, her eyes vast pools of alarm. What was it? Earth shifting? Before conjecture could form, the vibration returned, amplified. A cascade of pebbles skittered across the floor like disturbed insects. A fine powder of ancient dust rained softly from the vaulted darkness overhead. Move, Reese urged, his voice tight with sudden raw panic. Now! We lurched forward, navigation forgotten, instinct overriding reason. Survival narrowed to a single imperative. Find space, find structure, find anything less likely to collapse. The subterranean groaning intensified. Boulders, dislodged from their aeons-long slumber, began to plummet, forcing us into a desperate, stumbling ballet through the narrow passages. Lena's phone beam danced manically, its erratic flashes transforming the scene into disjointed frames of a waking nightmare. Just as exhaustion threatened to claim us, we burst from a constricted throat of rock into a vast cavern. The ceiling soared into unseen heights, buttressed by colossal pillars of stone, like the nave of some forgotten subterranean cathedral. It radiated a sense of ancient stability absent in the cramped tunnels. Wordlessly, drawn by a shared instinct, we converged near the chamber's center. We huddled close as the world shuddered violently around us. I felt Lena's trembling pressed against my side, heard Reese's harsh, ragged breaths. In that crucible of fear, facing the stark probability of our tomb being sealed, a fierce, unexpected wave of love for these companions washed over me. Whatever fate awaited, we faced it bound together. The Earth's paroxysm felt eternal, but likely spanned mere minutes. When stillness finally returned, it left behind a silence thicker, more suffocating than before. And darkness. Lena's phone was extinguished, whether shattered by the tremors or finally succumbing to battery death. I couldn't know. We were plunged into a blackness so profound, it felt solid. The adage about not seeing one's hand before one's face, always dismissed as hyperbole, was now stark reality. The dark was tactile, invasive, pressing against my retinas, seeping into thought itself. Is everyone intact? My voice emerged a dry rasp, thick with dislodged dust. I think so, Lena replied, her voice diminished, fragile. Reese emitted a low grunt of affirmation, a slight shifting beside me confirming his presence. We sat marooned in that sightless void for a long measure, each adrift in the wreckage of our own thoughts. The truth was inescapable now, entombed, perhaps irrevocably, lightless, helpless. The odds of rescue, of finding our own way, seemed infinitesimal. Yet, surrender felt alien. We drew breath. We existed. And as long as that held true, striving was the only recourse. All right, I said, shattering the stasis. Thinking caps on. There must be an egress. How? Lena's voice fractured. We don't even know where here is. No, Reese countered, his practical mind asserting itself even now. But caverns breathe. They often possess multiple mouths. Air circulates, or we'd be asphyxiated already. He was right. I inhaled deeply, forcing focus through the fog of fear. Okay, let's disperse slightly. Feel for any current, any drift of air. It could betray an opening. We fanned out, reduced to crawling, palms and knees mapping the uneven stone floor. Progress was agonizingly slow. Every minute or two, a name called out, a reply given, vocal anchors in the ocean of black. Time dissolved again. How long we scrabbled like sightless creatures, I cannot say. But then, against my cheek, the barest, most ephemeral whisper. Moving air. Friends, I shouted, exhilaration lending a tremor to my voice. Over here, I think I have something. Lena and Reese navigated by sound, converging on my position. Together, we oriented ourselves to that feeble current, hands tracing the contours of the rock wall it seemed to emanate from. The gentle drift strengthened, coalescing into a discernible breeze, and carried upon it a scent, impossibly miraculously, of damp earth, of chlorophyll, of life, the upper world. Hope surged, a potent fuel. We pressed onward, urgency lending strength to our limbs. The passage constricted, forcing us onto our bellies at times, scraping against the rock, but the promise ahead eclipsed discomfort. And then, piercing the absolute black, a minuscule point of luminescence. So faint, I initially mistrusted my senses, feared it a phantasm born of desperation. But as we crawled closer, it solidified, intensified. Daylight fractured and diffused through a fissure ahead. The aperture was scarcely wider than a man's shoulders, a negligible flaw in the mountain's flank, yet to us, it was salvation's gate. With a desperate shared strength, we attacked the opening, tearing at loose rock, widening the gap millimeter by painful millimeter. Stone bit into flesh, drawing blood we barely registered. At last, it was passable. One by one, we wriggled and strained, emerging from the planet's dark embrace into the staggering, almost violent brilliance of late afternoon sun. We lay sprawled on a mountainside far removed from our point of entry, gasping the clean, sharp air, blinking against the light. We were out. We breathed. As we lay upon the welcoming grass, soaking in the sun's benevolent warmth, a gratitude deeper than any I had ever known flooded my being. Gratitude for the simple, profound miracle of existence, for the resilience of friendship forged in darkness, for the sheer, unadulterated glory of light. Our subterranean trial had spanned less than 48 hours, yet it had irrevocably reshaped us. We carried out a stark reverence for the indifferent power of the natural world, and a newfound respect for the tenacity of the human spirit. But above all, we had learned, in the most visceral way imaginable, never again to mistake the light for granted. The deep woods, I'd convinced myself, held a particular kind of balm, an antidote to the city's relentless static. Quietude, isolation, a shedding of the world's skin. This was the promise. So, when Leo floated the idea of a weekend sequestered in some timbered refuge, the notion resonated deeply. We secured a place that whispered remoteness from its online photos, cradled by dense forest, nudging the glassy surface of a forgotten lake. Precisely the erasure I craved. What the pictures omitted, however, was the slow bloom of disquiet, the subterranean tremor suggesting we weren't merely visitors in those woods, but perhaps interlopers under silent observation. Our chosen sanctuary was a structure of aged timber and river stone, possessed of a certain rough-hewn allure. Sufficiently spacious for the four of us, myself, Leo, his partner Maya, and her friend Chloe. It featured a hearth vast enough to swallow logs whole, heavy beams striping the ceiling, and broad windows that stared, unblinking, into the tangled wilderness. We arrived as the afternoon bled towards evening, affording just enough time to deposit our bags and coax flames to life in the stone maw before dusk began its infiltration. That initial night unfolded easily. Conversation and laughter wove through the firelight, while outside, the shadows stretched into amorphous shapes against the glass. The absence of signal, a deliberate feature of our escape, felt initially like a breath held, then released, a delicious severance. Yet, the liberation I'd felt curdled overnight. Waking in the pre-dawn chill, I registered it first as a subtle wrongness, a faint dissonance I couldn't name. Perhaps just the unfamiliar groans of an old structure settling deeper into the earth, I reasoned. The air inside hung thick, strangely inert. Rising, I padded towards the kitchen, anticipating the ritual of coffee. The cabin remained stubbornly dim, despite the hour. Through the window, where sunlight ought to have been lancing through the pines, a dense pearlescent fog coiled instead. It swirled between the trunks, an ancient miasma clinging low to the ground, obscuring all but the nearest trees in its suffocating embrace. Leo emerged minutes later, knuckles grinding sleep from his eyes, already lamenting the digital void. We exchanged mundane pleasantries before Maya and Chloe drifted in. Over breakfast, we made light of the fog, planning lakeside diversions for its inevitable dispersal. But noon arrived, and the fog clung fast, seeming almost to condense, drawing the world into a tighter, colder knot. It possessed a quality that muffled existence, swallowing sound, rendering the surrounding forest preternaturally still. An oppressive silence began to press against the cabin walls. "Maybe a walk," Chloe proposed, her gaze fixed on the opaque world beyond the glass. "Find a trail? It has to burn off eventually." A knot of reluctance tightened within me, not from aversion to the walk itself, but from a primal whisper cautioning against breaching the cabin's threshold, against stepping into that waiting, watchful quiet. Leo and Maya, however, were game, and the prospect of solitary descent felt worse. Donning jackets, we pushed open the door, and the fog enveloped us instantly, a cool, damp shroud. The woods pressed close, a phalanx of tall, somber trees, their upper reaches lost in the gray veil. We found a path, little more than a deer track, barely wide enough for two abreast. With each step, the cabin receded, shrinking into the mist until it vanished entirely. Time became fluid, immeasurable. We walked through a muted landscape where the crunch of leaves underfoot felt distant, our sporadic chatter quickly absorbed by the damp air. Only the rhythm of our breathing and the sigh of some unseen breeze in the canopy remained distinct. A disquieting pattern began to emerge. The path, serpentine and unchanging, seemed less a route through the forest and more a circumscribed wandering. Every tree mirrored the last, imposing, dark-barked sentinels. No distinguishing rock, no fallen log, no glimpse of fauna, just the ceaseless repetition of woods and fog. "Should we turn back?" I ventured, the question hanging heavy in the air. "This trail feels circular. I can't gauge how far we've come." Leo offered a non-committal shrug. "A bit further. We'll head back soon." But soon never arrived. We pressed onward, the unease in my gut solidifying into a cold certainty. It felt as though the woods themselves were subtly rearranging, shifting perspective just beyond the limits of perception. The path seemed to fold back on itself, looping in ways that defied logic. I scanned desperately for a landmark, anything to anchor us, but found only the same indifferent vista. "I think," Chloe said, her voice a fragile thing in the immense quiet, "we need to go back now." Consensus this time was immediate, yet when we turned, intending to retrace our steps, the path was simply not there. "Where did it go?" Maya breathed, rotating slowly, her eyes wide. "The trail?" My stomach plummeted. No indentation in the leaf litter, no broken twigs, no evidence whatsoever of our passage. It was as if the forest floor had smoothed itself over, erasing us. We stood frozen, the unspoken admission hanging between us. We were lost. Fear, stark and undisguised, flickered in each face, even Leo's, whose composure usually seemed unshakable. "Okay, stay calm," he managed, though a tremor betrayed him. "We'll find it. The cabin can't be far." But direction had become meaningless. Every heading dissolved into the same labyrinthine woods, the fog intensifying, pressing closer. The trees felt anthropomorphic now, their branches like grasping limbs, the silence amplifying into a roar, and the distinct sensation prickled. We were not alone. Then, cutting through the stillness, a sound materialized. Faint initially, almost subliminal beneath our own frantic movements, but undeniable. A brittle rhythmic percussion, like knuckles rapping on dry wood. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, measured, originating from somewhere deeper within the fog-shrouded trees. We halted, straining to hear. The sound persisted, growing fractionally louder, seeming to drift closer. Tap, tap, tap. "What is that?" Chloe whispered, her voice thin with terror. Silence answered her. The tapping continued, its cadence steady, yet seeming to emanate from all directions at once, a disembodied rhythm echoing amongst the trees. "Move," I choked out, the word tight with visceral fear. "Now." We broke into a stumbling run, directionless, propelled solely by the urge to escape that sound. But the tapping pursued us, its tempo quickening, growing more insistent, frantic. Then, as abruptly as it began, silence fell once more. We staggered to a halt, chests heaving, breath pluming in the frigid air, listening with an almost painful intensity. Nothing. Not the tapping, not the wind, only the suffocating weight of the fog. Through a momentary thinning in the mist, I saw it. A structure, but not our structure. This cabin sagged, its timbers dark with rot and age, looking derelict for generations. The roof bowed inward, windows gaped like empty sockets, the door hung askew on corroded hinges. It stood in absolute stillness, an aberration in the woods, seeming to wait. A cold dread washed over me. I didn't know how we'd found this place, only that entering it was unthinkable. No words were necessary. As one, we turned and fled, plunging back into the blinding white, the trees seeming to warp and lean as we sprinted, blind and desperate. I don't know how long we ran, propelled by sheer terror, until we burst, gasping, into a familiar clearing. There, shimmering through the dissipating fog, stood our cabin. The relief was instantaneous, overwhelming. We never spoke of the other cabin, or the tapping, or the path that vanished. We threw our belongings into bags in frantic silence and were gone before nightfall, leaving the woods to their secrets. I have never felt the call of their quietude since. The first night beneath the eaves of our new possession, slumber shattered to the sound of children's laughter. It was a fragile thing, gossamer thin as a half-remembered dream, yet distinctly mirthful. We were childless, Clara and I. The old Finch place, a relic of weathered timber and embracing verandas perched on the town's ragged edge, had just become ours. It presided over 10 acres of rolling land, ancient oaks standing sentinel against the sky. We'd acquired it for what felt like a pittance. Ms. Albright, the estate agent, had fairly quivered with enthusiasm as she pressed the keys into my palm. "It's a place with presence," she'd offered, her smile stretched just a shade too wide. "I trust you'll find great happiness within its walls." Now, lying awake in the unfamiliar dark, those phantom giggles threading the corridors, happiness felt like a foreign currency. My elbow found Clara's side in the gloom. "Do you hear that?" I breathed, the question swallowed by the immense silence of the house. She surfaced from sleep slowly, blinking. "Hear what, Elias?" The laughter evaporated, leaving only the ancestral groans and sighs of the old structure settling into its bones. I shook my head. Nothing, must have been dreaming. But it wasn't a dream, and it was merely the prologue. Over the weeks that followed, the uncanny became our unwelcome routine. Objects embarked on solitary migrations, reappearing in locations we were certain we hadn't designated. Abrupt pockets of intense cold materialized in specific rooms, frigid zones that conjured mist from our breath, even on the warmest afternoons. And always, woven through the fabric of our days and nights, that laughter. "Clara, ever the pragmatist, attempted to anchor it all in reason. The nomadic possessions, simple forgetfulness in a new environment, the glacial spots, drafts, inevitable quirks of aged construction, the laughter, likely the distant play of children from a neighboring farm, sound amplified by the profound rural quiet. I wanted desperately to believe her narrative, but a deeper, colder instinct insisted something was fundamentally awry. It culminated roughly a month after our arrival. I was navigating the dust-laden expanse of the attic, attempting to impose order on the last of the cardboard boxes, when I discovered the journal. Bound in leather, cracked and faded like old parchment, it lay concealed behind a loose section of wallboard. Intrigued, I drew it forth and opened it. The script inside was spidery, challenging to decipher, but as the words yielded their meaning, a chill, sharp and invasive, traced its way down my spine. It was the diary of Elspeth Finch, the matriarch whose family had raised this house from the earth over a century before. What she chronicled was horrifying. According to Elspeth, the very land beneath the floorboards was blighted. The indigenous tribe, whose presence predated the Finches, had warned them against building here, declaring it sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds wore thin. But Silas Finch, her husband, was a man carved from stubbornness, and he disregarded their counsel. At first, normalcy prevailed. Then, their children began to transform. They grew withdrawn, whispering of unseen playmates and secret games conducted in empty rooms. Elspeth wrote of hearing laughter when no soul was present, of toys shifting position unaided, of shadowy figures glimpsed only from the corner of her eye. And then, one after the other, the children disappeared. The final entry was dated 1920. Elspeth's handwriting had devolved into a frantic, near illegible scrawl. "They are coming for me now," she wrote. "I hear their laughter. God forgive us our trespass." I closed the journal, my hands unsteady. This had to be some grotesque jest, didn't it? A prop left by former occupants to prey on the nerves of newcomers. But even as the thought formed, the attic air grew perceptibly colder, and I could have sworn a child's giggle whispered directly behind me. My descent from the attic was less a walk than a controlled fall. Clara was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The sheer domesticity of the scene felt jarring, almost violent, after the horrors I'd just unearthed. "Clara," I managed, my voice thin. "We need to talk about this house." I recounted everything: the leather-bound chronicle, the curse, the vanished children. As the words tumbled out, her face grew pallid, the skepticism in her eyes visibly warring with a fear she had clearly been suppressing. "Elias," she said, her voice low and hesitant. I think I've seen them." She spoke then of the fleeting shapes reflected in mirrors, always just beyond direct focus. The persistent, unnerving sensation of being watched, even in absolute solitude. The dreams that plagued her sleep. Visions of children calling her name, their voices laced with an eerie plea for help. We sat enveloped in a stunned silence, the implications settling upon us like a shroud. What was the path forward? Seek out an exorcist? Hastily list the property in hope some other unsuspecting souls would fall into its trap? Before any decision could crystallize, the lights flickered violently. The temperature in the kitchen plunged, our breath blooming white in the air. And then it began. The laughter, louder now than ever before, cascading from every direction simultaneously. a disorienting chorus of unseen merriment. Clara's hand seized mine, her nails digging into my skin. "Elias," she whispered urgently, "we have to get out of here, now." We bolted for the front door, but it held fast. The knob turned freely, yet the door itself felt bolted from the other side, held firm by an invisible obstruction. We tried the rear entrance, the windows, even the cellar hatch, all sealed, immovable. The laughter swelled, now mingled with the unmistakable patter of small, running feet and childish voices calling out to us. "Play with us," they sang. "Stay with us forever." We ended up huddled in the living room, involuntary witnesses to a terrifying poltergeist display. Books took flight from shelves, furniture executed clumsy dances across the floorboards, and all the while, those spectral invitations echoed around us. It was Clara who found the key. As an armchair hurtled past her head, her eyes caught a glint of something on the mantelpiece. An old arrowhead, flinty and dark, likely Native American, kept as a curio. "The journal," she gasped, the connection sparking in her eyes. "It said this was sacred land. Maybe..." She didn't need to articulate the rest. I lunged for the arrowhead, my fingers closing around the cool, smooth stone, just as an unseen force seemed to pull against my grasp. The instant contact was made, everything ceased. The airborne objects plummeted to the floor with dull thuds. The laughter cut off mid-chuckle. The oppressive cold dissipated as if a switch had been thrown. We didn't pause to question the reprieve. The front door now swung open without resistance. We fled into the night, still clad in our night clothes, the arrowhead clutched tight in my fist like a sacred relic. We drove, putting mile after relentless mile behind us, not stopping until 2 states separated us from the Finch homestead. We never returned. We hired a detached professional service to crate our belongings and manage the sale, insisting that the arrowhead and Elspeth Finch's journal remain with the property. We also mandated full disclosure of the house's history to any potential buyers. Last I heard, the place lingers on the market. The current listing describes it as a charming fixer-upper with a rich history. Clara and I call it a nightmare we barely escaped with our sanity intact. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I still wake with the phantom echo of children laughing. But now, here in our new urban sanctuary, insulated by the mundane symphony of traffic and the proximity of neighbors, I can usually convince myself it's just the residue of a dream. Usually. We don't often speak of what transpired in that house. It's simpler to frame it as a shared delusion, a byproduct of stress and fertile imaginations. But we both carry the truth, heavy and silent within us. And we both understand that sometimes the most persistent hauntings aren't the apparitions themselves, but the questions they leave etched onto your soul. Why us? Why that house? And what truly became of those children lost to the shadows long ago? I don't expect we'll ever possess the answers, and perhaps that silence is a mercy. Some mysteries are better left undisturbed, some doors better left unopened. All I know is this: if you ever find yourself driving through remote countryside and spy an old farmhouse for sale, one that seems too perfect, its price too tempting, keep driving, because you can never be certain what might be waiting inside, laughing softly in the darkness, poised to welcome you home. The vastness of Apex Center exhaled around me, a 50-story giant settling into its nocturnal slumber. or so I rationalized the first time the ceiling gave up its secrets. Faint, shuffling steps from the void directly above. Just the building breathing, I'd thought. But the half-consumed sandwich, discovered weeks later in the glacial quiet of a deserted break-room fridge, unclaimed and inexplicable, solidified a creeping dread. Someone else shared this vertical city, a phantom dwelling in the periphery. 6 months I'd patrolled these echoing corridors as night security. Leo, the grad student grateful for the paid solitude. Apex Center, largely abandoned after dusk, save for a scattering of obsessive souls on the lower tiers, demanded little. Rounds every couple of hours, a vigil over the silent mosaic of camera feeds, guarding against intrusions that never materialized. Staying conscious was often the peak exertion. It began, properly, on an October Tuesday, deep in the night's well. The 30th floor, a labyrinth of darkened cubicles, was my stage. My footsteps echoed. Then, another sound joined them. Footfalls, undeniably human, soft yet distinct, descending from the ceiling. I halted, every nerve strained. Silence stretched. Then, another step, a scrape like something heavy being dragged. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Floor 31 was vacant. My own eyes had confirmed it barely an hour past. My radio crackled as I keyed the mic. Sal, you painting pictures of 31? Sal, my counterpart, held court in the brightly lit lobby, lord of the monitors. A pause, static whispering. Negative, Leo. Asleep like always. What's up? A flush of foolishness warmed my neck. Heard something. Building groaning, I guess. Sal's chuckle drifted through the speaker. She's an old girl, Apex, full of strange tunes after dark. Don't let her spook you, kid. I completed my circuit, the unease clinging like damp, but the strangeness persisted, accumulating like fine dust. Minor infractions at first, a ceramic mug appearing miraculously clean in a sink, lights defiantly aglow in rooms I'd personally subdued. Once, a computer screen on 28 pulsed softly, a social media page scrolling endlessly into the void, hours after the last known occupant had departed. These whispers of wrongness I shared with Sal, who offered only shrugs. Some drone forgot to log off, or tidy up. Happens. Yet, the feeling gnawed, a persistent dissonance in the building's nightly rhythm. My rounds became less routine, more investigation. I sought the discordant notes, minuscule food debris in bins that should have been sterile, the subtle indentation on a forgotten sofa cushion hinting at recent repose. Then, the sandwich incident, perhaps a month after the initial phantom footfalls. Routine check, break rooms. The refrigerator on the 35th floor sighed open, releasing a puff of cold air. And there it rested, nestled on the top shelf, obscene in its mundane presence. Half a turkey sandwich. Incongruous because the 35th floor was a tomb, sealed weeks ago for extensive renovations. No one belonged there. The radio felt heavy in my hand. Sal, question. Any intel on a sandwich, 35th floor fridge? Sandwich? Confusion laced his voice. That floor's locked down tight, Leo. Nobody up there. My point exactly. I could almost picture Sal's frown knitting his brow. Right, stay put, I'm coming up. Together, we scoured the floor, a meticulous, fruitless search. Nothing else stirred, nothing seemed disturbed. The sandwich remained, a silent, crusty enigma, but it was enough. Descending in the elevator's sterile box, Sal's skepticism had evaporated. Okay, he conceded, his voice low. From here on, log everything. Every tiny thing that feels off, write it down. We'll nail this down. Our shared logbook grew fat over the following week, with entries detailing petty thefts of yogurt, the inexplicable dampness clinging to tiles in an executive washroom long dormant, and always, persistently, those feather-light footsteps ghosting through the upper floors. We presented our mounting dossier to the building manager, who waved it away with practiced indifference. Cleaning crews, maybe? Employees burning the midnight oil? Look, unless you physically see an unauthorized individual, my hands are tied. But the evidence resonated deeper than faulty assumptions. Someone, something, was woven into the fabric of the building, a hidden organism subsisting on the detritus of corporate life, moving unseen. The breaking point arrived on a Friday night in December's grip. Sal had called in sick, leaving me the sole guardian of the silent tower. A pre-holiday exodus had drained the building early, amplifying the quiet. Midway through my 10 p.m. round, the world vanished. One instant, the hallway blazed with sterile light. The next, absolute blackness crashed down. Almost immediately, the emergency lights ignited, bathing the corridor in a hellish, pulsing crimson. My hand automatically sought my radio. Dead, inert plastic. The backup generator, the lifeline for communications, should have roared to life. Silence. Something was profoundly wrong. Heart slamming against my sternum, I groped towards the nearest stairwell, needing the security office, the system panels. As my hand found the push bar, the stairwell door above exploded inwards, unleashing a frantic cascade of echoes, running footsteps, descending rapidly. I froze, hand still on the metal. Closer, closer, echoing, amplifying in the confined shaft. Instinct screamed. I let the heavy door swing shut, recoiling, eyes darting wildly for refuge. A janitor's closet, mere feet away. I lunged, tumbling inside, pulling the door almost closed just as the stairwell door below banged violently open. Through the narrow ventilation slats, bathed in the lurid red emergency glow, a figure slipped past. Humanoid, yes, but disturbingly gaunt, almost skeletal. Wild tangled hair framed a desperate face. His attire was a bizarre collage of scavenged office wear. A suit jacket swallowing his thin frame, mismatched trousers, shoes gaping at the soles. He moved with a jerky, unpredictable swiftness, head snapping left and right, scanning. In one hand, he gripped a weapon born of necessity, a splintered broom handle, its end sharpened to a wicked point. He passed my flimsy sanctuary. I held my breath, convinced the frantic thudding in my chest would betray me. He paused, a predator sensing movement. My blood turned to ice. Then, he continued, melting around the corner, swallowed by the red-tinged shadows. Agonizing minutes crawled by before I dared to crack the closet door. The hallway stretched empty, humming faintly with the emergency system's low thrum. My thoughts raced, chaotic. Escape, call for help. But the image of the man, cornered, armed, desperate, I couldn't abandon the building to him. The security office confirmed my fears. Backup systems offline, deliberately sabotaged. A quick check of the spare radio cabinet. Empty. He'd planned this siege, severing communication, plunging his domain into darkness. But to what end? As I weighed my perilous options, a crash reverberated from floors above, followed by the sharp tinkle of shattering glass. He was active, destructive. I had to intervene. Armed only with my heavy flashlight and a burgeoning sense of dread, I took the stairs, ascending towards the sound, guessing it originated near the 40th floor. How long? How had he existed here, a parasite within the host, unseen, unheard for so long? Reaching the 40th, I eased the stairwell door open. Sounds of frantic rummaging drifted down the corridor. An office. Moving with forced calm, I stalked the noise. Light bled from beneath the imposing double doors of the CEO's suite. They were slightly ajar. Muffled muttering now, punctuated by the scrape of drawers being yanked open. Taking a steadying breath, I pushed the door wide and stepped into the breach. He was there, hunched over the massive mahogany desk, scattering papers like fallen leaves. My flashlight beam pinned him, and he looked up, eyes wide, feral, reflecting the harsh light. "It's over," I managed, surprised at the steadiness of my own voice. "Police are coming. You need to come down now." He stared, uncomprehending for a beat. Then, with an agility that belied his emaciated frame, he vaulted the desk, launching himself directly at me. My flashlight came up defensively, a reflex, connecting solidly with his cheekbone. He staggered with a guttural cry, granting me a precious second to sidestep. He slammed into the doorframe, howling, a mix of pain and pure rage. Before he could regain his footing, I tackled him, leveraging my weight, driving him to the plush carpet. He fought like a cornered animal, all teeth and claws, but desperation lent me strength. "Why?" I grunted, struggling to maintain the pin. "Why are you doing all this?" His struggles ceased momentarily, his wild eyes locked onto mine, burning with a raw, consuming bitterness. "They took it all," he spat, breath ragged. "My job, my life. This is just reclamation." Before more words could form, the distant, rising wail of sirens sliced through the night air. Help was arriving. He heard it too. With a final, explosive surge of strength, he bucked, breaking my grip, scrambling to his feet. He fled. I gave chase, pounding through the crimson-lit hallways, but he moved with the certainty of a creature in its natural habitat, vanishing into a service corridor I never knew existed. By the time uniformed officers swarmed the building, he had dissolved back into the shadows. Their top-to-bottom search yielded nothing but his squalid nest, a forgotten storage space on the 49th floor, a testament to his long, hidden tenancy. In the aftermath, the story unfurled. Silas Thorne, a former analyst, dismissed years prior for increasingly erratic conduct. Rather than depart, he had simply stayed. He'd become a ghost in the machine, subsisting on corporate refuse and pilfered supplies, obsessively searching the building's digital and physical archives for proof of the wrongful termination he believed had fractured his existence. Apex Center underwent a security metamorphosis. Every neglected corner was probed, sealed, fortified with new technology. Protocols were rewritten, redundancies implemented. Yet, sometimes in the deepest hours, when the tower settles into that profound quiet and the shadows lengthen into unfamiliar shapes, I hear it, or think I do. A faint scuffle from above, a whisper of movement just beyond the range of sight. Is Silas truly gone, or does he linger still, a specter of grievance watching from the unseen spaces, waiting for another chance to reclaim his stolen kingdom? One truth remains indelible. I will never perceive an empty building as merely empty again. The most unsettling presences are sometimes those hidden in plain sight, breathing the same air, just beyond the veil of notice.